No, I want you to go up front here.
Can we go up front right
Up there.
She's my inspiration. Take it from there.
See how high his voice is? You gotta reach that same plateau.
Did you just get off stage? Let's work on the walls and redemption, okay? Is this on?
It's coming from within.
My brother turned to what so many young men turn to, the street life and selling drugs. Even though I was a police officer, I could do nothing to stop him.
Let's all meet as a group now. I think
The
we got
last
everybody.
line, the line that you have, I didn't raise your son to be a murderer, that really bothers me. It really bothers me. Can it be something else? I know you didn't raise your son to go to prison.
Saying to raise him to go to prison doesn't say what this was. Do you feel so strongly about
I
it?
feel so strong.
Let's talk about this afterwards,
The same way
okay?
you're talking to him is the same way you have to talk to the audience.
In confinement. Life ain't life at all. In confinement. So on I go, letting everybody know just what it's like in
Yeah,
here.
he sets the tone and keep it going.
Figure out which arm you're gonna do and really go.
That road to redemption has many twists and turns and will lead us into places that we never could even imagine.
Oh, good. Why are you saying this, Reach?
Because this is my story.
Yeah, how do you feel about this story?
I feel very passionate about
You
my
feel
story.
very passionate. Okay. Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to everybody.
Okay, good.
This mic needs to be turned up or something.
We're coming home. We're coming back as your communities looking for jobs, a place to live, a new purpose. We're in the stigma of our incarceration like a brand on our forehead or a scar on our soul.
Much better. You see how, forget about the words. Get the feeling of it. Then you go.
She's incredibly strong.
Look at her when you say that. Yeah, start again. Start again.
This is my mother, Lydia Jenkins. And she has lived through the worst nightmare a parent can ever endure, the death of her firstborn child.
So just do that. Keep it. It looks beautiful. I think you'll be great.
Okay, let's try one more time.
They called him an unidentified black male. He wasn't unidentified. He was my only son, Emir Green. Sometimes I feel like my street is a cemetery and the houses are tombstones. It wasn't always this way.
That was great. Okay. So we're going to take it from the beginning.
My name is Horace, and I'm here to honor my friends who died of violence 35 times last year. Stephen, Jalil, Fahim, Milton, intended or unintended victims, all too young to die. They die so often they barely made the 11 o'clock news. But with every gunshot, there's a mother's cry. With every empty seat at the table, brothers and sisters mourn. And with every empty desk at school, a piece of me, you die too. So I stand here to honor my friends and my brother and pray to God to send us angels to watch over and protect us all.
It's a lemonade kind of day. Sitting on the porch watching the sun. Screen door swinging back and forth, back and forth. Chicken frying in the kitchen. Mama's got an apron on, baby at the hip. The dust is settling. Cars coming up the street. Children are playing. Running and screaming, jumping rope, playing jacks. Daddy's coming home, Daddy's coming home. A real live neighborhood. Fire hydrant is open and Miss Penny is sweeping the street. Those boys are fighting again. Girl, go to Miss Lucy's house to see if she wants anything from the store. It takes a village to raise a child. Boy, don't you hit that girl. Didn't I tell you to keep your hands to yourself? Everybody mixes on this hot summer day. But there are drugs in the neighborhood. We lost Martin and Malcolm and Hope. Now, on drugs and mama's gotta work. Kids are left alone. Latchkey kids. Children raising children. Miss Lucy died. Her house is all boarded up. We lost our king. Yeah, our king went to jail. Teenage girls getting pregnant. She's a mother, but she's a child. We lost our Ooh. The children are in trouble. Come home. Save the children. You can't die. But Daddy's not there. He's in jail or just missing. Children looking for guidance, joining gangs. There are locks on the doors and windows and guns in the streets. Trash and broken bottles. Children are lost. Don't die. Come home. Come home. Crimson rivers flood our streets with the blood of our very own.
I don't usually tell people about the trees. How when you look really carefully, you can see at least 4 colors. Their leaves have fronts and backs of light and dark, sway with the wind like waves. The first time I really looked at a tree, it was probably the huge maple blowing in front of my house. I was mesmerized. I never used to really see trees. A tree was just a tree, nothing special. But that was during the part of my life I called BC, before my brother's murder. My younger brother, Emir, was the clown of the family. He told hilarious stories, cracking us all up. He was a born entertainer, and he loved to draw. My mom was a great mother. Unfortunately, Emir's dad was a heroin addict who abused her. There was no father figure, no male role model. Gradually, the streets lured him in. We had dinner at our table every night, but what went on outside our door was more than any of us could prevent.
When I was raising Emir, I didn't understand how hard it was for him not to have his father around. I remember people telling me that I couldn't raise a boy alone as a woman, and I say, what's wrong with me? I work every day. I have values and beliefs. I'm a positive person. I'm not a man, but why can't I be looked upon as a role model? What do you want me to do? I didn't have many men in my family, and none of them were willing to do anything.
My brother turned to what so many young men turn to, the street life and selling drugs. We all suspected, but we couldn't prove it. And even though I was a police officer, I could do nothing to stop him. I knew the signs. Friends stopping in front of the house, blasting their horns and not coming in.
Cars stopping in front of the house with tinted windows.
Knocking on the door at 2 a.m.
Hiding behind a telephone pole.
I confronted him. I even asked the B cop to look out for him, but we couldn't catch him. He had a double life.
When Emir was a baby, I knew how to take care of him. I knew how to comfort him. But when I picture him now, I see a teenager crying out for help, and none of us being able to do anything to help him.
We got the call from his friend who had paged him. His beeper had gone off in the emergency room at Einstein, and the nurse called her and told her he was shot and didn't have ID on him. She then called us. I remember when we drove up, me and my husband, the chalk outline was close to the curb, and his head was near the curb.
It was 2 cars, the car that Emir was in, and then another car behind him. Always thought about what was he thinking. It was dark. He was by himself.
I just remember it being real dark and thinking there's no witnesses because it's so dark, so there would be nobody to help.
On the way to the hospital, I knew he had died. I felt his spirit leave his body.
When we got to the hospital, my mother asked the police officer if the unidentified man inside was dead. He shook his head yes. When we got to the door, she asked me to go in first. I saw his New Balance sneakers sticking up from a paper bag at his feet, and I knew it was him. And then I pulled the sheet back.
I cried and I screamed. What have they done to you? His chest had 4 bullet wounds. Clear fluid was leaking out. It was as if the last bit of life was pouring out of his body.
We were looking at the exit wounds. At first, I went into police mode, checking on everyone to make sure they were okay. And then my sister grabbed me and held me, and I began to sob hysterically. This was not supposed to happen! This was not supposed to happen! I was a police officer. I thought I could protect them. On March 26, 1997, my only brother, Emir Green, was shot in the back 7 times and died on Rubicam Street. There is no way to describe this pain that never goes away.
I don't know, it's different when someone dies. You know, they're ill, they die in the hospital, or they die at home. It's different to have someone die on the street. You think of animals on the street, you know, get hit by a car or a cat, but you know, the fact that he was on the street, just, it's abnormal. It's not normal to die like that.
When the phone call rang that Anthony was shot and in the hospital, I screamed so loud I woke everyone up.
I stood and watched in horror as my daughter and sister were both murdered.
I didn't believe that he was dead. Come on, Kadir. Come on, baby. Wake up.
Jehovah, why couldn't you protect them just one more night? Just one more night.
I was insane. Somewhere between shock and hysterics, they murdered a part of me.
The night he died, I told my family, I'm not gonna make it. It just hurts too bad. I'm not gonna do this. I'd rather be dead. I'm already dead. They hid the knives and all my medication.
I was afraid to go into her room. My sisters and I didn't want to see her like that.
I lost a whole month. I remember nothing except lying in my bed listless. I was too mentally ill to care about my appearance. I'd been robbed of the most precious thing. I don't even know if I ate or drank or who took care of my kids.
I was suicidal and homicidal. Later, I became a zombie.
I lost my sanity, and then I ran to the streets, addiction, and then jail.
The only time I could forget was when I was asleep. And then I'd wake up and realize it was a nightmare that was real.
I have to say the truth. I did hate the man that murdered my son. All the nurturing and training and love I put into Anthony, and to have someone take it all away, I had to ask God to move the pain and vengeance from my heart.
I was in a rage, and I couldn't pray.
My sister said, it's been 2 years. You should be over it.
My mother said, let it go.
Some people said the stupidest things, like, maybe this was God's plan. Well, I don't know what kind of God you worship, or he's in a better place. Well, if it's so great, you go there.
It's been 8 years. A slow and painful process of healing that has no end. Some days are good, Some days are bad. Some days I'm numb. Some days I can feel my emotions. I'm no longer a zombie. It walked itself out of me one day 2 years ago. Now I speak for Emir, and I speak for the victims. I speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. When I look at the trees, I wonder if Emir ever noticed how beautiful they are. Maybe he didn't, and now he doesn't have the opportunity to try any longer. One flower can be so pretty, here today, gone tomorrow.
When I first came in, it was Miss Victoria and Arthur Vies told their stories, and it was hard to hear, and it was hard to really feel my place in it because I didn't know if I was going to be accepted into the group like that, or if my story was even along the same level as theirs in terms of what they went through. So it was actually hard, and I had actually reservations about continuing it just because it was just uncomfortable.
Listening to everybody's story, it was just amazing to me. Like when I listened to Hakeem, it gave a background to why he ended up doing the destructive things he did, which made me understand, you know, and it was not just Hakeem, but other young men who get caught up. You know, it's a story behind what they did, you know.
At one point in my life, there was a lot of hatred, a lot of bitterness. I wanted to do some horrible things, you know, and for years, and even now, a pinch comes back every now and then, you know what I mean? But when a certain party in the group, I found out that she was a policeman. A police officer. I really knew that I went some kind of transformation because I was hugging and kissing a married police officer. I had never had the opportunity to like receive the love from total strangers like I did from the people that was involved in this production. It was amazing.
I feel like the group that we formed almost immediately was a group that showed that there were no sides. The day you were born was an ordinary day, on the cusp of a day too hot to handle. Pushing and pulling, we pushed and we pulled. I got your weight. And I pushed and you pulled, and we pushed and we pulled, and you were so slow coming into this world, pushing and pulling and pushing and pushing and pushing. The day you were born, the sky was yellow, and you were filled with reds and purples and blues. But our house was too brown for the colors of your spirit. And when the gray of the world tried to shut you down, you muted your colors and toned them down to fit into a world not quite yet ready for the likes of you. And the pushing and pulling went on, a constant birth. But the streets pulled, and the ancestors pulled. And they gave us stories of resistance and transcendence. And you heard stories of acquisition and conquest and the materialism designed to reel you in. But the streets pulled and pulled, and education pulled and pulled, and racism pulled and pulled, and I fought for your life, and you fought for your life with a fist, not of violence, but a fist of rage. Until I saw your face when the 11 o'clock news, another young black man accused of homicide.
You probably want to know what I did that got me here. It was a gang war that led to that first juvenile lockup in Boston, Massachusetts around the same time that my father died. But I beat that charge. And after I beat that charge, I came back to Philadelphia, and I was caught out one night after curfew, walking home from a party. The first thing I knew was these blinding lights in my eyes, and then my back was shelved against the wall, and I heard one of the police say, "Black Sambo, you ought to be back in Africa." And then they started to beat me, and they beat me, and they beat me to a bloody pulp. And I believe that the only reason I'm standing here now alive, when one of them pulled his gun from his holster and aimed it at my head, this old sister walked down the neighborhood, and she saw him, and she screamed, "Oh my God, don't kill him! Don't kill him!" But the beating they gave me that night left me with 165 stitches in my head, a fractured arm, cuts and bruises on my body, and my face swole like a basketball, and a heart scarred with hatred and intent on revenge. Rage, rebellion, and revenge was now running the show. After that, the convictions piled up. Assaults, robbery, bank robbery, stolen cars, weapons, conspiracy, and politics. You see, by now, the crew I ran with, we believed we were revolutionaries fighting for a cause. But the cops and the media, they saw us as public enemies. It all mixed together in a terrible brew that wreaked havoc on so many lives. I caused a lot of pain to a lot of people, both in and out of the penitentiary. I stood over people with my hands around their neck. They'd be screaming and pleading for me to stop. "Please stop." And I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I don't know where that come from. It's like I was some kind of a beast, but I'm not a beast. I'm not a beast. But when that rage in you takes over, you go to some primitive place in your consciousness where all the rational and humane stuff just goes somewhere deep in you where it can't take hold. It's not an easy thing for me to talk about this stuff. I mean, if you have any soul, you never forget. The faces of the people I hurt will haunt me till the day I die. I wish that I could ask for forgiveness, but it's too late. There are some things you can never atone for.
Hear ye, hear ye. Will the mothers please rise? Mothers of the deceased, mothers of the accused.
Nothing in my life prepared me to be in the role of mother of the perpetrator. Nobody raises their son thinking that one day they'll be in court defending him from murder. This wasn't in my game plan. Looking at my son on the witness stand, I could see that he was scared, maybe even wanted to cry. He was all puffed up like he'd be when he was a little boy, and he'd be upset and he'd be trying to hold it together. But I knew that that county jury wouldn't see it that way. They would see a tall, young black man and see some tough-looking thug not being remorseful. But what I saw was my little boy trying to hold back his tears. My son's lawyer naturally highlighted all of the bad points of the victim, and I knew that that wasn't fair to his mother. We were taking her last shred of dignity in hopes of saving my son's life. I wanted to look at her. I wanted to say how sorry I was, but I didn't know how, because there we were, locked in on opposite sides, each in our own pain and loss.
Nothing seemed real to me. My insides were burning and bursting, but I told myself, don't scream. I had to hold myself together, to represent my son, to give him voice. He sold drugs, but he was my son, and he wasn't alive to defend himself. The man that killed him, he was so little. He was only 19 years old. How did he kill my son? What happened? When the foreman said life, his mother screamed. It was the same scream that came out of me when I found out Emir had been murdered. I just put my head down and wept. Nobody won. It was a hollow victory.
What criteria are you judging us with? Yes, my son is in prison, but it doesn't mean that I failed. People are so harsh with their opinions. The jury, always ready and waiting. But until you have walked in my shoes and the experiences of my life, there's no way for you to judge. I could tell you the whole sad tale, but it wouldn't explain it. I can tell you about an early pregnancy and fathers not supporting their kids. I can tell you about the oppressive sounds and smells of poverty that sapped my soul. I can tell you about the pushing and the pulling in the welfare line and a woman standing ahead of me holding a baby, and the baby was dead. I can tell you about the decision that I made to go back to school, to pull us out of the hole, watching the streets lure my children in. And I can also tell you about the battle that I did for my son's spirit and soul. I can tell you things that you wouldn't even believe. I can tell you things that you wouldn't want to hear. But there's mothers all over the city who could tell the same story. I raised my son to be an eagle. I raised my son to be an eagle, even though I knew there were a multitude of pigeons down here squawking, waiting to lead him into directions that eagles would never even fly, who didn't have his best interests at heart. I raised my son to be somebody. And all the strength that I had in me wasn't enough. And yes, he's caged up now, but I still want him to raise his majestic wings and fly. I know that he can.
Who is innocent? Who is clean? And what is gained by blame? Where are the eagles? Where are the angels? Where are the harbingers of change? All rise, I fall down to my knees. Who can hold the head up in the court of common pleas? There's not enough food, I can't make my lease. Can't seem to get no justice from the justice of the peace. And every time I come up short, someone's holding me in contempt of court. You wanna know where I'm coming from? Just check out my neighborhood. Don't call me incompetent when I'm so misunderstood. How do I plead? Tell me, how do I plead when the gavel is falling on the mother's seat? Oh, tell me, how do I plead? I wanna know, how would you plead when the gavel is falling on the mother's seat?
There was a time that I didn't want to talk about it, and I wouldn't talk about it. When I first started in prison ministry, I wasn't as gung-ho as I am now. My husband was in prison, my son was in prison, and it was very hard for me. It wasn't until I started going inside the prison that a lot of things came out. When I went in and I looked at these young men, and I'm seeing the face of my son, and I just kind of like start telling them, like, you don't understand what your parents are going through. And you're not doing this time by yourself. You're in here and you think that, oh, well, I'm locked up by myself. But no, this is a domino effect. You're locked up, Then your mother's locked up. Whoever else you left out there on the street is locked up with you. And you have no idea.
To the jury, I place myself on the stand to offer my life as an example. On September 28th, 1986, I, Reuben Jones, committed robbery, aggravated assault against an elderly gentleman in his own home. I held him at knife point, tied him up, and left him on the floor in a pool of blood. And there's no way to rationalize any part of this horrendous crime. It will always haunt me. But the damage that I caused is far greater than anything I could take into account back then. I hurt and traumatized many more people than just the man whose life I directly endangered. To the larger community, I perpetuate the stereotype of the dangerous black male and went against my deepest held beliefs. And to my parents, my crime and imprisonment brought you great shame and suffering. It tore you up. And to my then girlfriend who was pregnant with our child at the time of my arrest, you gave birth and raised our son without any support from me. Your feelings of betrayal and anger were devastating, but justified. And to my son, you've had to spend the first 15 years of your life with your father locked behind bars. We could never get those years back. And to my victim, you've had to live with the physical injuries, pain, and scars. All those countless hours in the hospital rooms and rehab facilities were only a small part of the trauma. You've had to live with nightmares and flashback memories and helplessness. I robbed you of your innermost feeling of safety and sanctuary in the world. And for that, I'm sorry. I can see all this now, but to be honest, none of this is what I was thinking back then. I was too busy running and justifying, trying to save myself from a prison sentence I didn't believe I deserved. I was still caught up in shock and denial and my own sense of anger and disempowerment.
In case of death, what do you want your body to say?
No matter how cool and strong I thought I was, this was real. For this, there was no preparation. My first night's initiation in prison came from watching 6 men take one helpless man into a cell where they brutally beat and rape him until the paramedics came to claim his battered and bruised body. And I thought to myself then, I'm gonna die in here before ever seeing the light of day.
Confinement! Confinement!
Life ain't life at all.
In confinement. Some say, take it slow, don't blow, be cool. Don't break no rules. You gotta bend with the wind in confinement. Some say, I only got a pound, 5 years, and I ain't gonna be down too long. I ain't gonna let a living soul blow my chop for parole. You even got some too scared to tell the man they got a cold. They just sit there, shivering in their hole, with toilet paper stuck up their nose in confinement. Confinement. Life ain't life at all. In confinement.
About freedom I dream. Though it's something I've never seen, from the womb to the tomb and everywhere in between I've been held in captivity. Chased by demons I can't even see. And yet, I still dream of brighter days and better ways to navigate this maze. The thought of being free captivates me. But the dream is shattered every morning with a strong dose of reality.
Wake up! Wake up! Hey, suckers, get up! We got philosophizers and sympathizers and analyzers and chumps.
We got dope addicts, pimps, hustlers, and faggot-chasing punks.
We got rape artists, murderers, bank robbers, and dudes with no label, too.
We even got an old brother with no home to go to.
We got snitches, and undercover agents, and unforgiving guards. We got black folks in guard uniform who don't know who they are. We got nationalism and communism, Islam, too. You name it, we got it for you. In confinement. Confinement. Life ain't life at all. In confinement. So on I go, letting everybody know just what it's like in here. And I have no fear. I'll just keep screaming and screaming and screaming and screaming. confinement, confinement, there's death behind the walls of confinement.
I never knew when you were going to get out, so people always ask when he's getting out. Don't know. It was never knew when I was going to experience my real dad in my life. So.
Did you feel like ashamed about that, or?
Nah, I didn't really feel ashamed. Of course, every kid wants their real mom and dad, biological mom and dad in their life, but you know, just to see how life would be. But over time, you know, that's life. It happened, so nothing you can do about it.
My father gave me so much, and then I felt like I was betraying my own father. I felt like I was betraying you. I felt like I betrayed myself and not being able to give my son the things that he needed and give him my son what my father gave me.
While you was gone, like, I mean, a lot of kids, when they get angry, you know, they try and, like, make excuses, I guess, you know. And my excuse not to get angry was, you know, didn't want to end up same place that you were at, you know.
You know, over the years, our relationship has gotten better. And I don't know some of the stuff that you still may be dealing with from those early years, but yeah, so where are we now, and where we headed?
Yeah, I think it's better, like you said, starting to get better, you know. And like most kids, you know, the older they get in life, the more their relationship grows with their parents. So all I see is growth from here on. You know, build, you know.
The reunion is not just them picking you up from the penitentiary and a hug and a kiss. I mean, all of those things are very superficial. The reunion is, you know, why you left me, you know, and what are you going to do to make up for the time that you was away, and look what you missed. And that's really the reunion, addressing those things, and that's very hard. I spent a lot of time in the penitentiary, you know, and in the play I speak about that. So that meant there was years that I never had the opportunity to give back. The Alumni Ex-Offenders Association is a group entirely of ex-offenders. The support leaves no holes undug, you know, from literally taking money out of one's pocket to give to somebody for rent, to getting food to feed the people, to letting people sleep on the floor of another member's house. Now I have the opportunity to give assistance where I know it's needed. I get the opportunity to prove to my family that it was worth them hanging in there with me while I was in the penitentiary all them years. That's what I get. In all total, I've spent 40 years in the penitentiary, and I don't ever want to go back there. I don't want nobody to have to spend the rest of their life in there. I mean, for anybody to be sentenced for the rest of their life in prison, to me is the same as saying that God can't change the hearts of men. And I know that's not true, because he changed mine. That urge and willingness to hurt somebody, I don't know when and how it disappeared, but it's gone. Now hold it. Don't get me wrong. I don't think no man is changed for the better just by being in prison alone. For those of us who did manage to turn our lives around, we did it in spite of the horrible things we saw in them places. We did it in spite of the horrible people that we became while behind those bars of inhumanity. Now, I still can't pinpoint the exact thing that turned me around. Maybe it was my obeying and studying and adhering to my religious faith, which is Islam. Maybe it was my finally taking an accounting of my own wrongdoings. Might have been that I just got older. Or maybe it was, and more than likely it was, God's grace. All I know is that I am no longer governed by a rage that I can't control. Turning off of that road to destruction has been a long, hard battle. And I'm grateful to Allah for every moment of sanity and peace of mind He's given me as I struggle to leave the penitentiary behind. Every good and positive step I take now towards helping another human being is a step that I take towards a brand new beginning.
When I would watch Ruben on stage, I could actually see him take off the old person and become the new person. I mean, actually on stage, when he talked about, at the time I was trying to fight, you know, about getting a long sentence in prison. I mean, you could actually see the transformation.
We've come a long way.
We certainly have. Yeah.
It kept me going. I mean, it afforded me the opportunity to bridge a lot of gaps that I had lost. My baby girl, Naima, she and I have done wonders. When she came to the play, I didn't know how she was gonna react. But she just walked up to me and she said, "I am so proud of you, Dad. I am so proud of you."
I turn to you now, the mothers who have lost so much. We're coming home. We're coming back to your communities, looking for jobs, place to live, a new start. We return wearing the stigma of our incarceration like a brand on our foreheads or a scar on our souls. Many of us return unprepared and unreformed, but others have done some deep work. Prison forced me to grow up. For years, even though the nightmare of my crime replayed in my head, I was disconnected from accountability and responsibility. But slowly, I began to let go of that old self and look direct at the pain I was in and the pain that I caused. And the more I was asked to let go of that old self, the more I began to take responsibility to evolve and to grow. Now, I'm working for my redemption. On behalf of my community, my family, my victim, and all of those men still locked behind bars who would never had an opportunity to taste freedom again. I speak for all those men who society has forgotten and discarded. We are still your sons and your brothers, your fathers and husbands. Many of us are filled with hope and inspired by the power of change. We're working for peace. And I turn to you now, youth who've grown up in the midst of so much violence. You've seen so much just trying to navigate your lives. So many of you have lost fathers, siblings, and friends to senseless violence and prison. But I beg of you, no matter how difficult it may get for you, please don't follow in our footsteps. This is not a path that will lead you to any kind of happiness. And Horace, I want to tell you that while I was incarcerated, I had to fight for custody of my own son from a prison cell. But I did it because I wanted to have a relationship with him.
That's right.
And I wanted him to know that he had a father who was willing to fight for him, even from a prison cell. I never gave up on him, and he never gave up on me. And I want to tell you the same thing here tonight, that no matter how desolate and dark life gets, always remember that you're loved. Because when you're loved, anything can happen. So don't give up, man. Don't give up.
We love you, brother.
Come on, let's shuffle. Deuces wild.
So my son has been home for 7 months. seems like he's been out forever because he's just so fully involved and ingrained in the family, and he takes good care of his son. So they're like it's a little family within a family.
Mom, you got something to tell me?
Oh yeah, you know what? I just remembered something. And we still have to go to the bank. So.
I mean, tomorrow morning is good for me.
Tomorrow morning is
I
good?
mean, early, like.
Early. Yeah. I was afraid that he would come out and he would be ruined, that he wouldn't be able to function in society and all that stuff. I am relieved that he's a lot better than he had weathered things and did a lot more with himself than I thought he would. Makai's just so happy to have his daddy, and it makes a difference. I mean, I just feel like his dad came home just in time. This is the part where you get escorted out of the casino. You know, I'm from the old school that when your children do things, it is your responsibility. That was the hardest thing. You know, my family is connected with the great pain of another family. And I think about the family, the other family. I think about the family victim all the time. You know, and I'm not a very religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. And I do pray for the family, you know, and them all the time.
Ready?
Yeah. Kind, loving Heavenly Father, we thank and honor you and praise your glorious and honorable name. And we ask, oh merciful God, that you bless this food to nourish our bodies. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. 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 Andrew, I need one of those, that right there. Thanks.
This is my mother, Lydia Jenkins. And she has lived through the worst nightmare a parent can ever endure.
Andrew,
The death of her firstborn child. Since I was only 2 years old, my brother was murdered. I've grown up seeing her cry. She's incredibly strong. She raised her brothers and sisters from the age she was 13 years old. She has raised 4 of us. Her head is still held high, and she is my inspiration.
Anthony was just such a spirited, loving person. He had this big, giant life.
Most of the stories that everybody tell me, my brothers, and it's like I have a picture of like everything like they tell me about him. Like being as though I was so young, I really can't remember a lot, but I can understand definitely how he was.
The main thing I think about is him laying in that hospital with his head swollen, with the syringes and stuff around his head. And that image never goes anywhere. I think about all the good times we had, and then it goes right back to that image of him laying with that thing around his head.
The idea of murder, it was frightening. Because who murders somebody, you know? And then you think about other people, maybe that happened to them, but then you never think about what if that comes to my home, and what if I lose one of my children to murder?
Sensation.
I've gotten such a fulfillment, you know, because I get to talk to the people in the audience. They come up to you and they just want to say, I couldn't say that ever to anybody, what you guys said on that stage. I lost my son or my daughter to violence. And all the things that I thought and the things in the way I felt, I was never given the opportunity to share that with people. And if I did, no one understood. And I'm sorry that you're doing this because you lost so much, but I'm happy that you spoke for me, and your voice, you know, has helped me to. I know that we can do something, and I know we can. If we work together and we try, we can help. I don't want to see any more children die. And I don't want to lose any more of mine. I had to start with my own healing, my own loving, my own forgiving. Maybe all we can do is pray and love each other as though we really mattered. Every last broken, battered one of us. Growing up in a family of abuse and addiction, marrying into abuse, and living with the murder of my firstborn son hasn't broken me yet.
It has taken me to my knees, it shattered my world, and it broke my spirit open. And I believe that this brokenness is where the healing began. So my prayer for our city and our land is that we can all break open so that a new vision can be seen.
And beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there's a field. I'll meet you there.
I know you didn't raise your son to kill anyone.
I know you didn't raise your son to sell drugs. And I know you didn't raise your son to be killed. I'm sorry.
Now it's time for the next generation. After my son Emir was killed, his girlfriend gave birth to a beautiful boy, Emir Jr. He's 8 years old now. He is a beautiful young black boy that I truly adore. He asks questions about how his father died, and he cries because he's afraid that he will die from violence too. The road to healing is long and hard, but I'm committed to do everything I can to help create a world where Emir and his peers can grow safely to adulthood.
Thousands of miles along the road to redemption. No need to make that walk alone. And if you're tired, there'll be a place at the table. The gates are open, you can always come home.
I will exchange my sorrow for happiness, my hatred for forgiveness, my grief and pain for healing, for me and everyone else too.
I'm helping my son exchange that hardness for something soft and real, redeeming it like a coupon, and reclaiming that goodness that's lived inside of him since the day he was born.
Sometimes the only peace, love, and forgiveness that other people will see is through us.
If you have any soul, you never forget the faces of the people you hurt. Each and every step that I take now towards helping another person is to make up for the wrong that I did then. I'm working for my redemption, giving back in terms of what I took away.
The family of the man that I harmed hasn't received any justice. There hasn't been a fair and equal exchange of pain and loss, and they want to know why. But all I can do is work to transform myself enough to be able to look in the mirror and see a worthy person, and then transform all of that into actions for good. And there's power in that kind of redemption.
I'm listening to my own true voice.
I'm becoming a bigger voice for me and my son. I see myself first speaking for Emir, my family, the community, the city, the country. And when the lens widens, I become the voice for all black boys who are human and whose lives are not valued. I stand for all of them with my head held high.
Thousands of miles along the road to redemption. No need to make that walk alone. And if you're tired, there'll be a place at the table. The gates are open, you can always come home.